Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Thursday, June 18th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Owen Gleiberman on the film franchise that he unabashedly loves, and I do too. Toy Story 5 arrives in the multiplexes on Friday, and that prompted Gleiberman to take a long look back at Pixar's foundational film series. But before we get to that entirely charming conversation, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. SiriusXM has renewed its pact with Lewis Howes' podcast, The School of Greatness. It features conversations with high achievers on how to reach greatness in life and work. It's a good bet that Ben Stiller will be at the New York Knicks NBA Championship celebration parade today in New York. Stiller has set up a docuseries on his beloved basketball team with A24 and HBO. Producers United has lawyered up. Entertainment litigator Bonnie Eskenazi and labor and employment attorney Allison Beloven have been retained by Producers United as the organization moves forward with a collective effort to set industry standards for the role of the producer. See Variety's cover story from November on Producers United for a primer on all of this. My colleague Matt Donnelly, who wrote that cover story, has the scoop about the lawyers. Netflix has drawn the curtain on The Burrows, the sci-fi series from the Duffer Brothers of Stranger Things fame. The timing of this decision is interesting because we're starting to hear a lot of FYC buzz around Alfred Molina and Alfre Woodard's performances in the quirky series set at a retirement home. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Owen Gleiberman, Variety's chief film critic, joins me to explain why he loves the Toy Story movies so much and what these films represent after stretching out across a generation. The first one was released in 1995. I remember it well. It was one of those movies that announced the arrival of a new era for filmmaking. Animation has really never been the same. Owen Gleiberman, thank you so much for joining me.
Nice to be here, Cynthia.
Your review of Toy Story 5, which you very much like, really took a long lens at this series that is now 30 years old, 31 years old, actually. The first one came in 1995. What inspired you with this review? What sparked you about Toy Story 5?
The way I would rate this movie is simply to say Toy Story 5 is as fantastic as all the others. And I think there's maybe never been a series in all of Hollywood history that is quite like that. I was thinking back over the series and about how people like to choose their favorite Toy Story movie. A lot of people say Toy Story 3 is the masterpiece. I personally think the greatest Toy Story movie is still the first one, made back in 1995. It's not just nostalgia. I've seen that film many times, and I think it's just the best. But, in all these judgments, there's also a little bit of carping sometimes. You'll hear fans say they think Toy Story 4 isn't so great. And because I actually love Toy Story 4, I just thought back over this series and went, oh my God, all these judgments kind of miss the point, which is that each and every one of these movies is amazing. They all work together. They're greater than the sum of their parts. And that got me to thinking they're kind of like the Beatles albums. The Toy Story movies are all brilliant. They're all different. And they're all of a piece. Why choose? And to push that analogy into slightly ridiculous terrain, I thought, well, if the original Toy Story is Meet the Beatles and Toy Story 3 is Sgt. Pepper, Toy Story 5 feels to me sort of like Abbey Road. It's this sublime summing up. It's a movie that kind of reflects the whole series, and it might just be the perfect ending.
I can close my eyes and see Buzz and Woody and Jessie walking across the famous Abbey Road crosswalk. What do you think it is about Toy Story?
The Toy Story movies are great because obviously, in a way, the toys are us. I mean, these incredible characters, who we've lived with for so long, some of the greatest voice performances you ever saw in an animated film. I mean, as real as any human actors you're watching. And these characters who just channel our anxieties, our dreams, our jostling egos. But these are also some of the greatest movies ever made about childhood. The whole relationship between children and their toys is so multi-layered. And that's what Toy Story 5 gets into pretty deeply because it's about a new layer, the one added by technology.
It almost reminds me in a way of that Michael Apted movie series, 7 Up, where he sat down and talked to the people every 7 years in their lives. Like every so often, a Toy Story movie comes along and it becomes a mile marker.
This series gains somehow in richness and depth with each new film because we've lived with these characters for so long. I think the Toy Story movies are incredibly happy movies. I can't offhand think of movies that fill me with delight more than these do. At the same time, they're so great because they're real, they're very humane, and they deal increasingly with this bittersweet theme of loss. The toys, seeing their child owners grow up and leave them behind
Mhm.
is very wistful. The toys at this point are almost like parents watching their children go off into the world.
To Disney and Pixar's credit, to the credit of Tim Allen and Tom Hanks, they're very protective of those characters. As much as they've merchandised and featured them in specials and things, I can't ever think of a situation where you're like, wow, that seems a little out there or weird for Woody or Buzz to do. They seem very, very protective of those characters. When I wanted to ask you to sort of put your mind back to 1995, I can remember what just the animation style was so arresting. The story around Pixar was Steve Jobs and these geniuses in Silicon Valley have figured out computer animation. Can you remember how the style itself announced Toy Story as a franchise to reckon with?
Absolutely. I think it announced something bigger than even the franchise. I mean, when we saw that first movie, I didn't even necessarily think there was going to be a sequel. It just announced this whole form of computer animation that was here, that was going to be a paradigm shift. I remember I came back from the movie just thinking hand drawn animation or anything that looks like it is kind of over, and though that would be an exaggeration. There's a way that computer animation just did displace it. I think part of the miracle of that movie is that they just came up with this perfect way to have form follow function. Namely, at that point in 95, you couldn't have a computer generated animated character who was human, who looked fully human. They hadn't kind of achieved that yet. Maybe they still haven't. But so they said, all right, let's make the movie about toys, these characters made out of plastic, because that we can do completely realistically. And so they created this universe that felt just in looking at the textures of these toys, the way they moved, it felt completely real. And in that sense, they had gone back to that magical primal impulse that was there in the early Disney animated films, where when you saw rushing water in a Snow White movie or something like that, you just thought that was miraculously, or they did back in the 40s or whatever. And they did the same thing in Toy Story with computer animation. They kind of rediscovered the miraculous quality of movies.
To add that warmth, they married it with incredible music from Randy Newman. Now that song, You've Got a Friend in Me, is just become it's synonymous with Toy Story, but it's also synonymous with childhood and growing up. It's in the best Disney tradition.
100%. And, the bar is high for the music, and Taylor Swift really lived up to it. I mean, when her song comes on at the end of Toy Story 5 over the closing credits, the movie has already lifted you, and this just lifts you too. It's just perfect. You know, it just sends you out on a cloud.
Owen, thank you so much. You are always so insightful.
Happy to do it, Cynthia.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Here Comes Can Lion next week. We are going to have a lot of Daily Variety and Strictly Business episodes coming at you next week. This is a festival that loves podcasting. I'll be there covering all the buzz around marketing, advertising, creativity, digital media with my great colleagues Todd Spangler, Elsa Keslasi, and Ramin Satuda. Don't miss my colleague Chris Willman's thoughts on what Taylor Swift's reunion with country means for her new tune, I Knew It, I Knew You, from the Toy Story 5 soundtrack. It's a good read from someone who knows what he's talking about when it comes to Taylor Swift and country music. Don't miss my colleague Allison Herman's interview with the great Matthew Reese on his offbeat Apple TV series Widow's Bay, which just wrapped season 1 and has been renewed for another round. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Carrie Furman. She's been named Chief Operating Officer of Radial Entertainment, headed by former Paramount executive Jeff Schultz. Furman was most recently head of business strategy and operations at Sony Pictures TV. She spent 12 years at that studio. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Owen Gleiberman. Sticks, Nicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and don't forget to tune in Monday for another episode of Daily Variety.